Welcome to Unexpectedly Successful. Join us to hear the raw and genuine stories of women founders who have created their own pathways to possibilities.
Hey, Griselda Martinez, your host here, bringing you live stories to help you craft your next step. This conversation was with Michelle Savage, who was so insightful and thought-provoking. We talked about what it means to be a mom and a business owner, using a restaurant business to create a community, and the importance of getting a good understanding of your business numbers. Let's get going.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unexpectedly Successful, the podcast. Today, we have our very special guest, Michelle Savage, co-founder and president of Savage Goods. Savage Goods is not only a neighborhood cafe, but it's a local place for people to gather. And they are very proud of making their products from scratch. And so it's yummy place to eat in downtown El Paso, here in the region of the border between Mexico and the United States. Michelle, welcome to our podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It is exciting to have you here and get to know a little bit more about Savage Goods. To begin the conversation, Michelle, can you please tell us, what does it mean to be Michelle? What does it mean to be you?
That's such an interesting question. I feel like so much of my identity recently has been boiled down into being a business owner and a mother. And so beyond those roles, it's hard to even say what it means to be me. That's actually something that's been top of mind for me this year, as motherhood and business ownership has been my identity so concretely now for so long that I feel like I've lost some of those other identities. So that's such a hard question to answer beyond that. But I am a business owner. I am a mother, and live here in El Paso, Texas. I've been here about 10 years. Love being outside, love my Peloton and movement. So yeah, kind of rediscovering myself again after a few years of full immersion into those other roles.
Wow. We look forward to hear more about that. Michelle, before you were with those very important roles that you have now, what would you have said that was Michelle before you launching your business or before you having a child?
Yeah, I think an adventurer, someone who is very curious. Even starting our life here in El Paso was a huge leap of curiosity. I'm from the Midwest originally and spent my whole life there, but started over here about 10 years ago. And so I think just someone who loves to meet other people, connect, love to be in a crowded room with lots of people, meeting new people, hearing their stories. Just real social, extroverted, love to be outside. That's held true. But yeah, just real curious and always like something new, like a little bit of change.
Awesome. Michelle, what brought you to El Paso? You said that it was part of the adventure you took.
Yeah, I had kind of a whirlwind year there for a minute. I met my husband when we were living on two separate continents. He was in Germany and I was in Chicago, and we met one weekend and kind of upended my life. Quit my job, moved to Germany with him. We were married about 6 months later, and then really just wanted a new place to call home. Kind of a new adventure that wasn't his life, wasn't my life, wanted something fresh. So his family was here in the Southwest, and there was the promise of no snow, which I have found out is not true since moving here. But we just really wanted something new and something exciting. And so we thought, why not start here and see where it goes?
Wow. And how long has that been since you moved to El Paso?
Summer is 10 years, which we really thought we'd be here for 2 and then we would move on. But we've grown some really deep roots here. So it really feels like home at this point.
My following question is, what has been one of the most defining moments in your life? So if it's not those 2 that you mentioned, can you think of something else?
Well, I think there's been a lot. I made a decision in college to quit nursing school and study Spanish and communications, which really set my feet on a much different path than I originally anticipated. And I think that decision, I look back at 18-year-old Michelle and really admire the bravery of that decision, because it was defying a lot of expectations, but I just knew I needed something different. And that decision took me to study abroad in Mexico for a year, which, I fell in love with the Spanish language. And I think really has kind of come full circle now living here in El Paso. And that desire for community and connection and adventure. I think that was one of the most defining moments. And then since then, meeting my husband, Tyler, and just kind of starting this whole fresh life. And then starting the business, the Cafe Savage Goods, has completely changed the trajectory of my life very unexpectedly. So some real milestones there.
Wow, you are definitely an adventurer right there. So you mentioned that you made that decision. Was that based on just you wanting something else, or was it something external? What made you make that decision, just to capture how Michelle's brain works here?
I think I was starting to feel really confined. I felt like all of a sudden the path was very laid out for me, what my life would look like. And I thought that I loved nursing, but I really realized what I loved was exploring different cultures. I had done lots of medical missions trips where I had gone overseas to, work with populations from a medical perspective. And I loved that. But what I loved was the interpreting, the connecting with people of different cultures. And so really felt like nursing was something that was expected, but it wasn't my passion. The language and community and people was my passion.
All right. We're seeing a trend here, a pattern. So on this adventure and what you mentioned about starting a business being so crucial in your life and now in your roles in life, do you remember having that moment when you had that crazy thought, becoming a business owner? What was going on in your mind? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I often say that we were kind of accidental entrepreneurs. There wasn't really a moment where I decided I'm going to open a restaurant. It really happened kind of accidentally and organically, and in a lot of ways with me kicking and screaming against it. When we first moved here, we started a farmer's market stand, honestly, just for something to do and a way to get to know some people in our neighborhood. And that was in 2013, and it just kept growing. And we got busier and busier, and we had this very sketchy setup of frying donuts in our kitchen with a commercial fryer and extension cords. And it just kept growing and was really successful. And then along with that, felt this real need in El Paso for a third place, those places where you can connect with people outside of work and outside of home. And so that combination of love for food and this desire to create communal spaces just kind of naturally evolved. And it took us 4 years to decide to actually even pursue it as a brick and mortar business, because we felt like we don't know what we're doing. Not a single one of us has a business degree. It just felt like such an uphill battle. But once we realized like we've got something special here and we have something we want to create in this community, it all kind of came together from there in a clear vision. So I think one day I kind of woke up and thought, oh, I'm a business owner now, more than actually deciding. Yeah. Yeah.
So Michelle, you've said we started doing farmers market. Can you please tell us a little bit about the story of the we and how you got to the farmers market and then the evolution from there? And then one day you woke up to being a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started the farmers market. It was my husband and his sister, Mariah, and I. And the three of us all lived in the same apartment building. And she's an incredible baker, and I have a background in marketing. And we had all just moved here. And like I said, we're just looking for a way to get plugged into the community. We were all working jobs that we really didn't enjoy and wanted this creative outlet. So really on a whim, 1 week started baking at like 8 p.m. on Friday, and then walked all of our stuff across the street to the farmer's market on Saturday. And it just kind of happened. And from then on, every Saturday we were at the market and really developed this incredible customer base. Many of them are still with us now, 10 years later, now that we own the brick and mortar. And so, like I said, just as it kept growing and we kept feeling like we love the food aspect, but our favorite part was those Saturday mornings, really connecting with people, watching people, have babies. And then all of a sudden they were 3 years old and we had done the cakes for every birthday party. We'd been part of their special days. We'd seen them every Saturday. It was such a special experience. And we felt like we really want more of that. And so the three of us, part of the dream was we wanted to create something cool with people we love. And how incredible is the opportunity to create something with your two favorite people. And thankfully our skill sets are so diverse. I have a marketing background. My husband's very good at big picture logistics, and Mariah's exceptional in the kitchen. So it really just gelled very well to be a good team.
All right, Michelle, this is a really cool story of how this super team came together. And I love the part of two of your favorite people and having the opportunity to launch something as a team. When you talk about you all having jobs that you did not necessarily look to retire there, how was owning your own business a possibility to change that?
Yeah, I think that one of the hopes from opening our own business was to create some freedom, some flexibility, the possibility of something that could sustain us even beyond us working the day-to-day shifts, building something that will last in the community, but also last in our lives. And I think we all felt like we were on career paths that had natural ends. You can climb the ladder so far, but none of us felt like this was our life's passion or dream, the fields that we were in, and just felt like we were meant to create something bigger and more special. And the opportunity, again, to do that with people you admire and respect and trust is a real gift. So it's been interesting now. Being a mom, I feel so thankful for the flexibility that owning my own business has given me. In a lot of ways, it's both, right? Because in a lot of ways, I feel very tethered. I feel I'm always working. I'm always on call. But in the other sense, I can take him to a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day. I can go to the zoo with his preschool class, and I have ultimate freedom in my day-to-day to be wherever I need or want to be. And that has been a real huge gift. Like beyond anything, I think that flexibility has been one of my favorite parts of being my own boss.
And you also talk about freedom. What is freedom for you, Michelle?
I think just that, the flexibility. I think a lot of people get into owning their own business to make a lot of money, and owning a restaurant, pretty much from the beginning, that's not how it's going to go. We're not a tech company. And it wasn't ever about that. It was about building a life we love. And so often we were feeling in the corporate world really trapped by the 8 to 5. You have to sit at this desk, even if you're already done with your work. Just feeling really confined. And so the freedom to work remotely, the freedom to use Savage Goods as a platform to create something else. There's just so much potential in what we have built to use it to build more of the life that we love. And I feel really thankful for that.
That's awesome. I love that possibilities to live the life that you love. That's powerful. Yeah. Even beyond just the word freedom, right? It's just that possibility. That's super cool. So when you became a businesswoman overnight, what were those thoughts? What was Michelle thinking at that moment when you said, OMG, we have a brick and mortar. What are we going to do?
Well, I actually remember that moment very specifically. It was after our first day, our opening day. We had been there for 20 hours or something. And I remember walking up the steps home and saying, oh my God, we have to do it again tomorrow. And just realizing we had pushed so hard. There had been so much work to get open, and then realizing, oh, wow, now this is what we do. And I think that came with a lot of excitement and just hope and potential. And a ton of fear, just a lot of insecurity, so many questions. I feel like they talk about those stages of learning where you don't know what you don't know. And then all of a sudden we became aware of all the things we didn't know and all the things we had to learn to be able to actually run the business, not just open a business. So, definitely a lot of insecurity, fear, some imposter syndrome of who do we think we are doing this? And some of that has, I've been doing this now for 5-6 years. Some of that has really carried through, and some of it has quieted a little bit most days, thankfully.
Wow, you talk so much about so many things in that comment. You talked about the journey. You had worked so hard to get to that opening day. Can you share a little bit about going from a stand at the farmer's market to then have a brick and mortar? What was that? What required you to do? What preparation, what resources, what type of energy you needed to get there?
I mean, it was relentless. I feel like our friends could speak to the fact that we were just head down, like solely focused on this for 2 years. It was, not having studied business, not coming from business backgrounds, the progress was very slow. We had so much to learn and had to really find the teachers and find the resources on our own, which was challenging. So there was a lot to learn. I mean, we hired a CPA, we hired a lawyer, we had to do all of the legal and financial paperwork. A big part of our time was split between finding investors. So we have 8 investors who supported us. And then other fundraising, we did like a Kickstarter campaign. We did a ton of stuff to really build buy-in from the community before opening. So that was a main focus. And then finding the right location. I think we toured over 40 locations in those 2 years. We knew that it needed to be somewhere really special. And so those were some of the main challenges, finding the money and finding the place. And then all the while continuing to develop and invest in the Savage Goods brand so that when we opened our doors, it wasn't to crickets. When we opened our doors, it was to a line out the door. People knew we were there. They had been waiting. So that was a lot of what we were working on in that time.
Wow, that sounds like a great strategy. Michelle, how were you able to see that bigger picture and see forward for opening day and you wanting to have a following and people waiting for that versus just doing the hard work of the brick and mortar and then just opening doors? How did you get to knowing that strategy and going about the investment as a strategy to also have buy-in?
Yeah, I think we had watched a lot of really incredible restaurants open and close. Like the food was great, the concept was great, everything was great, but nobody knew they existed. And by that point, just in our 3 years that we had in El Paso at that point, 3 of our favorite restaurants had gone through that cycle. And so we felt like, all right, we know the turnover rate with restaurants. The statistics on opening a restaurant are terrible, as people reminded us very often. And so what do we need to do differently? And thankfully, because we had been at the market, we knew we had the potential to cultivate this loyal customer base. We already had a brand. We already had a product people had tried. They had enjoyed it in their homes. So we called it experiential marketing. As much as we could get people to eat our food, then they knew they liked it and they'd be more likely to stop in. To try a new restaurant, you really have to break a habit and go out of your way. Normally you go to the same places over and over again. So why would you try something new unless you knew it was already good? So some of that comes from a marketing background. Some of that just comes from my own experience. I'm a picky eater and I'm not a person who is the first to try a new restaurant. And so if I spent $1 on a cookie and know it was amazing, well, I'm more likely to stop in. And since we wanted it to be such a community gathering place, that community buy-in felt essential. We wanted the people in our neighborhood to feel like their fingerprints were on this place and that they had a seat at this table. So the Kickstarter was less about fundraising and much more about people feeling and being really involved. So some people have their names on plaques on the back of the chairs. That was one of the rewards. People got the opportunity to name menu items, like just ways for people to really feel like they were part of making this happen.
Wow. I love the concept of the community having their fingerprints at Savage Goods. That's ownership right there.
Yeah, part of what was cool, we just celebrated 5 years, was looking back through photos, and we would have random neighbors stop by and paint with us for an hour or clean floors. Like while we were building out, people, like it literally bears the fingerprints of this neighborhood and the community. People were so excited. And just, that's really special. We feel really lucky. That's a cool thing.
So Michelle, from what you've talked so far, it was you had a goal in mind, the vision, and then you reverse engineer on how to get there. It sounds like it. You knew that you wanted a place for the community and for the community to be part of this effort, and then you work towards getting that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you're a picky eater, but also you love food. So tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm the black sheep of the restaurant ownership team here, because Tyler and Mariah both love food and are very adventurous and incredible cooks. And I am not. I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin, very meat and potatoes, but I'm the resident vegan. And so that's been a lot of what we do is really have an inclusive menu for vegan, gluten-free people with dietary restrictions. So thankfully, most of what we do is comfort food. It's donuts, it's cookies, it's breakfast burritos, really approachable, really comforting, really warm and welcoming. So a lot of the menu was designed around me being very picky, but thankfully we have a very talented cooking team and chef team that has pushed it far beyond what I would normally do.
Wow. So you were your target audience and you were the check-in point, huh?
Maybe at the beginning. I think thankfully it's grown much beyond me, which is a good thing. We have, at the beginning, it was really just the three of us. And now we have such a great team that brings in a lot of culinary backgrounds that has really pushed it to the next level.
So, Michelle, this is a moment of a big importance for this podcast. Were you expected to be successful?
I think me personally, I have always felt the weight of expectation from my family, from the way I grew up. Definitely expected to achieve, although that was nebulous. That could have been anything. That could have been being a nurse. That could have been a traveling doctor, but there is this expectation of performance. So I have always felt that very strongly of the weight of that. Savage Goods specifically, no, truly the amount of bankers and advisors and potential investors who kind of laughed us out of the room of, you don't know what you're doing, and a new restaurant run by three outsiders will never succeed in this city.
Wow.
We heard that over and over. No, and Mariah and I led most of the business development side. And so we sat across the table from a lot of older men who had a lot to say about our concept and our business plan and our vision. Those meetings were pretty discouraging because pretty much everyone told us there's just no way. There's no way this works. And so we're not going to support you or give you money, but good luck. Hope it goes well. Thanks for the cookies,
So what kept you going?
Tenacity, stubbornness, I think belief in ourselves, but also we had evidence. The people who came to the market came week after week. They would come to our house and pick up, goodies from our apartment where we were cooking from. There was a real demand for what we were creating. And it was beyond just the food. People felt very connected to what we were creating and how we cared for them through the food. So we had some evidence that, no, we're doing something that people want, and we know ourselves well enough to know that we will not rest until it succeeds.
Wow.
I also think that partnership, I've watched a lot of people by themselves open restaurants, and it's brutal, but having the three of us in it together, I felt like anytime one person got really burnt out or discouraged, the other two could rally around. And so at any time, two of us were lifting the third up. And so that really kept us going through some pretty challenging days.
So you mentioned in a couple of instances, not only working within the core team, but also having investors and advisors. You talk about bankers, and then you mentioned now you having a bigger team. How did you go about searching and finding, just the idea of you realizing you needed experts in areas that you weren't experts on, and then how you went to get it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at the beginning, it was very obvious to us that we needed experts in the business development side. We knew we didn't know what we were doing and that we had way more questions than answers. And so one thing that really helped us was we really approached this as beginners. We didn't have business backgrounds, so we knew we didn't know anything. We weren't walking in assuming we knew how to do this. So We got a ton of help from the SBA. Here in El Paso, we have the SBDC, which supports local small businesses. I would meet with those advisors once a week and just be running through 1,000 questions each time. Wow. We were able to find a great CPA who gave me a ton of his time, a really supportive lawyer. So we tried to assemble this advisory team of people who knew so much more about their area than we did. And thankfully, several of our investors are, they're invested not just financially, but they really believe in us and care about what we're creating. And so we're very eager and willing to give us a lot of their time and perspective. It took us, unfortunately, longer to realize that we needed that kind of support in the day-to-day. Really, just this past year, we hired managers for the first time. We have been running it completely on our own with just a team of employees for 4.5 years. And we finally realized how much we would benefit from experts in the restaurant industry, front of house managers, bakery managers, head chef, really coming in and bringing their knowledge and experience to the team. And it's made a huge difference already. So we were slower to learn that one, but it's really, it's transforming the way we run the business.
That's awesome. And I'll go back to that piece in a little bit. You talked about you having a team, three people who like each other a lot. What has been the flip side of that during challenging moments?
Yeah, I mean, we like each other a lot. We trust each other a lot. While that has been one of the best things about running the business, it's also been one of the hardest, is how complicated our relationships have gotten. Tyler has now stepped out of day-to-day operations, and that was largely because we would lay in bed at night and talk about the staff, and we'd wake up and talk about the staff, and we could never set work down. And especially once we became co-parents, it felt like, okay, we're co-parents and we're co-workers. We have lost all partnership outside of that, and so that's been a helpful shift. But it's taken us years to really be able to draw some boundaries, to be able to protect our family relationships outside of our working relationships. So it's complicated. It's complicated and it's messy. I think the nice thing is, at the end of the day, we really do care about each other a lot and are mostly able to set it down, but it's not been easy.
But you've made it happen, right?
We've made it happen. Yeah. And Mariah and I, so we've completely run operations now since 2020, the two of us. And I think we've really established a deep bond of trust and respect, really, affirming each other's leadership and skill set in a way that has helped change the culture of the company in a really positive way, where it's a really affirming, supportive, and also accountability-based leadership style that has worked really well. But it's taken a lot of work, a lot of really hard conversations, a lot of candor to get there. So
you've mentioned in a couple of instances the diversity of the backgrounds and the skill sets. How do you see that as a valuable and key component to a successful business versus everybody doing the same, everybody having the same skill set, everybody having the same strengths, even though it brings other opportunities for chaos, right?
I think a couple of things. I think that means that someone is always approaching it as a beginner. And as a beginner, you can ask a different kind of question because you don't have any background information. So I'm not from, cooking world. That's not my background. So I can ask Jason, well, why would you do it that way? Have you ever thought about doing it this way? Because I just have no idea. And Jason's our head chef. I didn't mention that. Okay. He, who's been cooking for 25 years, it's always done this way. You lose that curiosity and possibility of beginnerness. So I think from every facet, someone is always a beginner and can ask that really good question that often helps us consider a different way of doing it. The restaurant industry is very steeped in this is how you run restaurants. And we really wanted to challenge that in a lot of ways. Largely culturally, we wanted to challenge that, but also just some of the expectations of what restaurant leadership is like. And so having some voices that didn't come up through the restaurant industry has been really helpful. But also I think it helps us, like I said, balance the energy a little bit. If one person's down, the other two are generally in a better place, and all approaching problems from a different perspective really helps us have that continued energy and balance.
That's awesome. Diversity is important for new ideas. And I love the word you use, beginningness. It's just a constant fresh set of eyes and just creative juices opportunities, right? So Michelle, you mentioned you hire some of the initial things, you hire a lawyer and a CPA. Why do you think those two hires were crucial for where you are right now?
They helped us really legitimize the business from the very beginning. We were concerned, having run it as a home business for so long, that it would always feel like this home business family business, which there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but we thought that might hold us back from growth and legitimacy in the future, whether that was future loans or expansion, things like that. And so we really wanted to make sure we were doing it right from the very beginning. And I can spend a year learning business law and learning QuickBooks, but that did not seem like the best use of my time when someone else, this is their entire background. So I tend to want to be very controlling, and I actually do read tax law and do try to understand kind of what the expectations are there. But it has been helpful to have people who can really be a resource, answer those questions quickly, and who are interested in our success as much as we are, but are on the outside. They can just provide a different perspective.
Yeah, just expertise that would take you years to achieve, right? And you did not go into the restaurant business to do accounting.
No. And I did our QuickBooks for a year, and it was ugly. So we hired a bookkeeper who now does a very good job, and that gives me a lot of peace of mind. That was part of it. I want to go to bed at night knowing the accounting is done and the IRS is happy. It helps me to have a team of experts on my side that are just handling that.
Awesome. Michelle, you've mentioned also that you wanted the numbers to be correct and to legitimize the operations of your restaurant. Why is that so important? Like, what would you tell a person considering opening a business or even considering opening a restaurant, a cafe? Why are those numbers important?
Well, I think with a restaurant specifically, there's a lot of different kinds of numbers. Some of them are important just honestly from a legal and liability perspective. If you're opening your own business and you start not filing the right paperwork, that can lead to a heap of trouble very quickly. And if you're not protecting yourself from the liability, it could come back on you personally. And so we're serving people food all day long. It was very important to me to protect ourselves as the business owners. But beyond that, it took us several years to really get a good grasp on our operational numbers. And I felt like that really held us back because we were making a lot of sales. There was a lot of people. We were busy. We were making and selling food, but we never really knew if we were succeeding or not. And we didn't even really have a measure for what that looked like until the end of the year when you said, well, did you make a profit or no? And the answer was no for the first 4 years, but we didn't really know why. So we have now learned a lot and are able to not only understand our numbers, but begin to control them, which again, gives immense peace of mind, but it's giving us a platform to make decisions from a place of stability instead of panic. When we didn't understand our numbers, we felt like just sell more. As long as you keep increasing sales, the business is succeeding. In our case, that was not the case. The faster we made sales, the faster we were losing money. And we didn't realize all the holes and all the inefficiencies that were taking place. And we were just sinking fast without really realizing it until we were able to take control. So some of that just takes time and experience, but taking control of the numbers has been significant and really turned around the course of our business.
So, Michelle, you talked about holes and inefficiencies. What was the worst one you discovered and said, oh, my God, why are we doing this?
I think that's the interesting part is there wasn't anything like that. It was 1,000 little things.
Wow.
Just all these tiny things that feel inconsequential, but they really add up at the end of the day. Not thinking, well, we don't ever waste food, but okay, the greens showed up all bruised. And so we threw away half a bag, but nobody's tracking that anywhere. Or something as simple as, okay, we used to give away free cups of water, but now we have bottled water. And so instead of just giving water away for free, we're charging for water and saving the cups. It's 1,000 little things, but recognizing those little inefficiencies. And then labor is probably the biggest one, I guess, is realizing if you're having people stand around, we don't pay waitress salaries. We pay an actual salary plus tips. And so labor is our biggest expense. And so making sure we're hiring the right people who get the vision and want to contribute in the way we need for a small staff, that has been really important. And the wrong people and a lot of turnover is hugely inefficient.
So Michelle, you mentioned employees. How was that moment in which you not only had a business, but you had employees under you that you were responsible for? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part of running the business is the team. We have an incredible team now, and that's taken a lot of years of intentional culture building. It was pretty tough at the beginning, partly because we didn't know what we were doing, and I think our employees realized that pretty quickly. We started with a team of 8, which in hindsight, I don't know how we did it with only 8 people. We ended up growing to a team of 25. And then when COVID hit, we shrunk everything down, and now we're back to about 16. But, I, at this point, feel like they make the restaurant way better. They take it to a level that we couldn't on our own. The customers really connect very deeply to each team member. The team members do a great job at welcoming and hosting our customers, and they really make it the place that it is. So I'm super thankful for them. And we've learned a lot in how to empower and encourage and support and care for our team members while also holding them accountable and pushing them to be their best selves and contribute to the growth of the team and the company.
Wow, what a balance right there.
It's not easy.
Wow. So you mentioned 2 things. One, that you went to 25, from 8 to 25, and then to 16 during the shutdown. But also you mentioned that this last year has been the first one with a profit. How are you able to do that with a smaller team?
Well, it's a smaller team, but it's a more efficient team. It's a more well-qualified team where we've really focused on almost eliminating turnover. Some is natural, but unnecessary turnover, I guess I should say. So hiring the right people into the right roles, realizing once you hire someone, what roles to kind of guide them into and where they're not a good fit. But also now that we've hired some managers, we have people other than us who are dedicated to the success of their team. So my front of house manager is watching her front of house spending. She's watching her labor. She's very committed to being efficient in her department. So instead of me trying to control everything, I've got people dedicated to, also supporting us in finding those efficiencies. So I think reducing turnover, hiring the right people, and then training them, onboarding them well. We used to kind of just throw people into the deep end, like, welcome, grab a rag. We don't know. Everything's crazy. We're like just running around on fire. And now we have a training program. So people feel like from day one, they have support, they have leadership, they have the tools they need to succeed. And that's made a big difference.
Wow. What a learning process sounds like that to be.
Yeah.
So Michelle, why did you decide to do for servers a salary versus a wage? Why was that important to you, despite being the biggest expense for the restaurant?
Yeah, so 2 reasons. One, we really liked the counter service model. So where you go to a counter, you order, and then you go sit down and we bring you the food. It felt really important for us because we could calibrate the experience a little bit more. When you go to a restaurant and the food was excellent, but you're over here in the corner and your waitress was terrible and ignored you and forgot about you and was rude, your whole experience of the restaurant is tainted by that experience of that one person. It doesn't matter that the food was good. And we felt like at the counter, there's 4 different people. There's a barista, there's a register person, there's someone making coffee. There's a lot of opportunities for us to host you, for us to care for you, and that it's more likely for you to feel seen and cared for that way than just with one person that gives you one experience. So that was a big part of it. And the other part was just, again, making it the team be more cohesive and communal. They work together in a different way because they all share tips. And so it means a lot for them to support one another, to make sure no one's drowning. One person can't get super far in the weeds because we're all there to support each other. And just really focusing on that community support from everything from the team interaction all the way to your experience as a customer has been a huge priority.
That's awesome. I love that concept of supporting each other, not just because you want to be nice, but there is an incentive behind it too, right? That's super cool. I love how you frame those two priorities. So taking a turn, what has been one of the most stressful moments of fear, confusion, where you're like, what am I doing?
Just one?
You can share a couple if you want.
Yeah, no, I think there was a moment in April of 2021 where we had been surviving COVID for a year, but realized that if things didn't turn around soon, we had about 2 months left, like just based on the money we had in the bank and where we were at. We were really hitting the end of our possibilities with what we could continue to sustain mid-pandemic. So that was a really scary moment of, we've worked so hard, but it might not be enough if things don't change. That was a really just like a dark moment of needing to navigate what would that mean, and is there anything we can do to move forward well. I think that would have been kind of the low point, but there's been a lot of moments along the way where, there was right before COVID, we were hitting our highest sales we've ever hit. We're still actually not back to those sales, but we were watching money pour out at that same rate. And that was really terrifying because we felt like we're working ourselves to the bone. We're working more than 100 hours a week. The restaurant is full, and yet we are failing, and no one knows it but us, but we know it. And just that feeling of we're doing something wrong, but we don't know what we're doing wrong. That was pretty terrifying. So COVID hit right after that. A month later, we shut down. And in some ways, I think that was a really good thing for us. It gave us the opportunity and permission to completely stop, reset, start over again with a lot more understanding and intention, and to build something fresh instead of just getting swept away. Without COVID, I don't know that we would have survived that year, because we were heading down a pretty bad path towards burnout, towards relationships devolving, and also just financially pretty unsustainable.
Wow. Usually on restaurants, you hear that COVID was something terrible that was leading for them to consider closing. And it's super interesting to hear that for you it was an opportunity to reset, to revamp, to set you in the right path, opposite of what would have been otherwise. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had its challenges. Don't get me wrong. It was a really challenging year, but we couldn't have otherwise said, nope, just kidding. We need a month off to recalibrate. We'll be back in April. No one would have gone for that. Whereas with COVID, we were able to really hunker down. We closed completely for 3 months and start from scratch and say, like, what isn't working and what can we try instead? And really start over with a new team, a new perspective, 2 years of experience under our belts. So I think it was kind of a rebirth for us, which we really needed.
So, Michelle, what did you do after those 3 months of being closed? How did you adapt to that big challenge of people being fearful, people being concerned of like who's making my food and all these things, and also wanting to take care of your own people, right, in the team? How did you adapt to that? What do you do?
Well, we took the stance over and over again of out of abundance of caution. If there was any concern about, if one of our team members got sick or anything like that, we were always very cautious with protecting our team first, because if we can't care for our team, then we can't care for the community. And almost everyone on our team lives in some kind of multi-generational household, and it felt very important to us to care for them well first. So that was a really high priority. And then we just took every precaution that we could think of and that we saw other people nationally doing, masks and plexiglass and distancing. We did takeout only for a year, where you ordered online and you picked up in the parking lot. And we did that for far longer than our customers were happy about, but our team just wasn't ready to welcome, we see 300 people a day. They were not ready for that kind of interaction yet. And so as long as they weren't comfortable, we weren't going to reopen. thankfully, the community was super supportive. They grumbled a little bit, but kept showing up and kept us going through that year. But coming back has been interesting. We've now been fully reopened for, I guess, almost 2 years. But we're still really scaled down from what we were. We used to be open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day. And now we're 7 to 2, 5 days a week, and have really given ourselves and our team permission to do less and to say no. And that has led to a lot healthier culture, but also to profit, which is kind of unexpected, but apparently was the better path for us.
That's a super interesting just finding that with less hours, with less people, you are still more profitable than what you were before. That is super cool. And congratulations. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Michelle, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that Michelle has been defined by 2 main roles for the last few years. Tell us about being a mom and a business owner, co-founder and president of a restaurant.
It's exhausting and also really cool. I walk to work. We live pretty close to the cafe, and most mornings I'm walking to work watching the sunrise, just thinking how lucky I am to get to do those 2 roles. I feel incredibly fortunate, but there's not a moment in my day where someone doesn't need something from me or isn't asking something from me. I'm the person who receives every crisis phone call, whether it's about my son or the business. And so that can be really draining and consuming. I think that is something I have felt over the past couple of years, is just pretty depleted in response to the demands of those 2 roles. It's also very gratifying and identity giving. It's been expansive in a lot of ways. I have loved both of those titles and both of those roles, but it's a lot to give. It's a lot to give the world and to these people,
So tell us about the role of your son. For the audience, his name is Will, and how he interacts with being part of a family-owned business. How do you think that he takes that and it's part of his upbringing?
Yeah, that's something I'm really excited to see. So he's 4 and is very comfortable at the cafe. I mean, he's there all the time. And so he moves through the space very comfortably. It's part of his day to day. I mean, we're there all the time. It's funny. We actually picked up coffee from a different local coffee shop the other day, and he just could not understand why we weren't at our own coffee shop. I think it's made him really comfortable being around other people because he's just, people know him, they recognize him. People remember me being pregnant and have really walked with us through the journey of his growing up. So I think he's really comfortable in those spaces. Unfortunately, it makes him kind of a terrible restaurant guest other places because he thinks he can just walk into kitchens and treat it like his living room. So we have to often remind him that, no, at this restaurant, we actually have to sit here.
Big lesson there.
Yeah, but I'm excited for him to get to grow up in seeing me be an entrepreneur, seeing me balance those roles and, be achieving in this way. I think watching powerful mothers is a really significant experience.
So if we fast tracked and Will is about to make a decision for his own life, what would you hope that he gets from this experience of growing up in a family of entrepreneurs?
I hope he feels a sense of permission and curiosity, that there's a lot of different ways to live and to work and to create meaning and create something special in the world. Like it wouldn't surprise me if, we kind of pendulum from what our parents do. So maybe he'll pick a very traditional life path and become the doctor or the nurse that I didn't become. But I hope it expands his understanding of what is possible, and that we get to create the life that we want to live, that we have a lot of agency over the life that we build for ourselves and take ownership over that.
That's super cool. And you demonstrated by just doing it yourself, right? Which is really not only saying it, but actually doing it and showing by example.
But I think that's a good reminder, even as you say that, am I doing that? Like making sure I'm making decisions from that place, from our values. You know, it's easy to get caught up in what the expectation is of Savage Goods, but what am I choosing and how am I choosing to spend my time and attention, even within this world that I've created? I want to see him making decisions from a place of value and intention there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Michelle, what's next for Savage Goods? Tell us what plans you have for the future.
Well, currently we're still working on working ourselves out of a job a little bit. So hiring the right people to take over daily operations so that we can begin dreaming about what's next instead of making coffee and wiping tables. We currently are developing a pretty robust catering presence in El Paso, which has been really fun and exciting. Just a really new facet of what we get to do. So we'll just keep focusing on that. I think we've learned well at this point to say no to a lot of things so that we can really stay in our lane. And so no crazy growth. We're going to keep kind of intentionally making decisions and take it one day at a time and hopefully just keep a sustainable, healthy, great business.
Awesome. Michelle, you mentioned you want to remember about creating that life you want. And then you also said saying no to a lot of things. How do those come together?
Yeah, I think that was part of our downfall at the beginning, is we felt like we had to say yes to everyone. We had to be everything for everyone, because if we said no, then we would lose sales. And if we lost sales, we wouldn't survive. And really learning that by saying no to a lot of things, we can say yes to the right things. That has been a painful lesson, but I think one that we've learned and that really translates into my personal life as well. I am a people pleaser and I want to make everybody happy all the time. And that leads to a massive amount of emotional burnout. And so really learning, I heard boundaries described as guardrails once. They're guardrails that keep you on the path towards the life you want and the life you're building, and instead of distracting you all the time. And that's been a helpful visual, not to get pulled into so many directions for so many people. So really trying to prioritize. We schedule 1 or 2 adventure outings a month for our family. What kind of screen time we do for ourselves as the adults and for our son, like just all those little things of learning what to say no to protect our sanity and our levity, our light.
Michelle, if you were to summarize this journey of excitement and growth and just so diverse and rich, how would you summarize being a co-founder and business owner for Michelle? One word.
Oh, that's hard. As far as the journey, I would describe it as unfinished. I still feel very unfinished at the beginning of this. I still feel like I have so much to learn and so much potential left. I think that would be my word to describe where I feel I'm at in the journey now. Looking back, possibility maybe. I think there's a lot of openness and hope and excitement that comes when you realize you have something special that you want to create and give to the world.
Awesome. I love that. So for closing, Michelle, what words of wisdom would you give to the women who may be listening to this and are at the verge of deciding whether or not to go forth in creating their own possibility, to create their own path to purpose and profit?
I think I would say trust your gut. I think one of the best things I did was ask 1,000 questions at every stage of this journey, but sometimes that meant that I was letting other people make the decisions. I was trusting their gut over mine. And that often led me down a path that didn't feel authentic and ultimately didn't suit me and what I was building. So I'm learning to harvest all of that experience, harvest those perspectives, ask the questions, and then sit with what I believe is the right path for what I'm building. And that learning to trust my own decision-making has been really challenging, but I think one of the best things you can do to make a sustainable, beautiful thing.
Nice. That's a great closing, Michelle. That would be my last question with respect to the interview, but how can people find Savage Goods? Can you give us your website and social media?
Yes, you can find us at savagegoods.com, and we're on Instagram and Facebook at savagegoods.
Oh, that's easy enough. Savage
Pretty
Goods
easy.
and savagegoods.com. All
Yep.
right, Michelle, it's been a pleasure hearing your story, hearing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and really hearing the inspiration of why you are still on this journey and the unfinished journey for Michelle and Savage Goods to come, for more to come.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.